So we are in the middle of a pandemic. It is literally making us sick. It's literally killing us. Millions are out of work. No matter who the president is, that person needs to make the most informed decisions possible. So that's where our own Jim Sciutto comes in. You know him as a CNN anchor in the morning. Also, he's all over the place, especially when there's international news. He has remarkable insight into how vital information is handled with this particular president. It's part of his new book, Must Read, The Madman Theory. Trump Takes on the World, goes on sale next week. It's good to see you, Jimmy.
Good to be on. Thanks so much, Chris.
So give us the headline. What did you learn about how people who ordinarily give everything they know to a president handle this president?
This was one of the most remarkable and telling instances in this presidency, and it was repeated, frankly. But at the height of tensions with North Korea in late 2017, the president's military advisors were so concerned about his decision-making and his unpredictability that they hesitated to give him military options because they were concerned he might use them and he might take this country on the path to war. You might remember at the time there was this discussion of a bloody nose strike, some sort of limited military action that would send a message to the North Koreans, right, and kind of bring them to the table. The fact is, no one in the Pentagon thought that such a thing existed because any attack would likely be interpreted by the North Koreans as an attempt to end the regime. So they hesitated. And beyond that, Chris, they even conveyed to their North Korean counterparts that they didn't know what the president was going to do because they were concerned that the two countries were on a path to war. And it didn't stop with North Korea. At some of the most tense moments with Iran, the same thing happened. Hesitation to give military options, but also communication to adversaries. In the midst of this, in fact, our toughest adversaries, that they did not know what the president was going to do, and they were concerned what path that would lead this country on.
Now, the quick counter would be, yeah, that's why Trump's good, because you're able to go to your adversaries and say, we don't know with this guy. He may come out swinging, so you better check yourself. People will say, yeah, Trump, strong. I like him. Thanks, Jim.
Here's the thing, is that, and this is the origin of the title of the book, The Madman Theory. It actually relates back to Nixon because Nixon attempted to use a similar strategy against the North Vietnamese. He had Henry Kissinger communicate in no uncertain terms to the North Vietnamese that he was just crazy enough to order a military strike on North Vietnam. He didn't intend to do it, but he wanted to gain leverage in those negotiations. Fact was, it failed. You know how that war turned out. Trump's madman theory, the difference is that he applies it not just to adversaries, but to his own allies in these interactions, and often to his own staff and advisors, that he keeps them on it. They don't know what the next play is, and therefore they're playing catch-up. There's, the national security decision-making process follows the president's decisions. It doesn't come in advance. And I spoke to senior intelligence officials.
Well, that's an important point. They can't hit you over the head with the unnamed sources thing. Bannon, Navarro, McMaster, Susan Gordon, Fiona Hill, and others went on the record for you in this book.
That's right. And I made a point in this book. I spoke only to current and former Trump administration officials because I wanted to get a view inside this administration. And frankly, if you do me the honor of reading the book, you'll see that I give credit where credit is due. And I give every opportunity to the president's critics and supporters to explain what they support and what they don't support. And there are instances in this book where the president, frankly, deserves credit. Standing up to Chinese malign activities, stealing of intellectual property, things that were tolerated before he drew a red line under. The question is, and this is a question I attempt to answer in the book on all these national security challenges, are we in a safer place today than we were 4 years ago? And the sad fact is that when you look at a North Korea or an Iran who have made progress in the nuclear sphere, no, we're not. When you look at Russia, it is more aggressive, not less aggressive. And that's the real test here. You can claim that the madman keeps everyone on edge, but if you're not making your country safer, then that strategy has failed.
The one thing that troubles me that's in the book is that you document that intel officials intentionally reduced briefings to bullet points because he only reads like the first two, and that they also intentionally keep negative information about Russia from him. The second one's more troubling than the first. Why would they do that?
Well, let me start with the first, just because it is telling. In his term, when H.R. McMaster was his national security advisor, and I spoke to him for this book as well, he and his team realized that the president was not reading his briefing materials. They would go in and they could tell as they were discussing Iran, North Korea, et cetera, that he was hearing these things for the first time. So they developed an idea where they would boil the briefing materials down to note cards with 3 bullet points on them and hope that he would process that information. What they came to discover over time is he wasn't reading all 3 of them. He was just reading the first 2. So they adjust and they concentrate the most salient information in the first 2 bullet points, and the third one's a throwaway. Over time, they realize he's not reading them either. And listen, if you're making these kinds of decisions, you need to be informed. Now, the other point you mentioned is that the president often bristled at information and intelligence he didn't want to hear, particularly on Russia. So many times his briefers would go in and they would talk about a Russian threat, not just to elections, but other areas, other U.S. interests. He wouldn't want to hear it, or he wouldn't believe it. And we've seen this in his public comments as well. And that sadly led them to brief him less on Russia, because they have to keep these lines of communication open. And if they brief him on these threats and the president closes his eyes and ears to them, they're not doing their job either. But what that led to was another problem, which is then the president became less aware of the threat. And that, of course, is not what you want your commander-in-chief to do.
They might want to add some phonics on those flashcards so that he gets the Thai in Thailand instead of saying Thailand, which is something you probably can't fix in a briefing. Jim Sciutto, congratulations, and thank you for doing the work to help everybody else understand this situation better. The book is called The Madman Theory: Trump Takes on the World, on sale next week. Thank you, Jimmy.